Today, I am going to be doing my kind of July wrap up. Some of these things I read outside of July, some of these things I read at the beginning of August. I'm not really going to try and separate the two. So it's kind of a recent reads. That it is what it is. Some of these things I'm not going to go into too much detail about because it might be. I'm not going to say it might be. Some of these are definitely from my Lee Bardugo vlog, where that is 2 hours of me talking about these things. I understand that not everybody has 2 hours, but that video is time-stamped, so all of the books that I read for that have a section. You can just go to the description. You can hear my immediate thoughts about that thing there and like leave the video if that's all you want to do. So I will like give general thoughts here, but again, I have a 2-hour video where I already talked about Lee Bardugo. I'm not going to go into it again. Some of these are also from the reading vlog I posted a couple weeks back. And I'm not going to go into too much detail there either, because again, there was a reading vlog. I talked about those things. It feels a little redundant. So the first book I need to talk about is Sadie by Courtney Summers. I listened to this on my way into the wilderness because 1, it was available from my library, and 2, I had heard nothing but very good things, and I feel like I was lied to. The story itself was just very bland. I didn't really care about what was going on with Sadie or her sister or all of the terrible, horrible, no good things that had happened to her and her family. I didn't think that it was well written, and I didn't think that it was particularly good, particularly when BookTube had hyped this up to me for like years at this point. So maybe it was just a case of like it was overhyped, but overall, Sadie by Courtney Summers was not that impressive. The next book that I read while I was away was A Chorus Rises by Bethany C. Morrow. This is the companion novel to A Song Below Water. Here we follow Naima and the fallout. Her name is Naima, right? That's what I'm remembering. Yeah, Naima Bradshaw, in the fallout of what happened at the end of A Song Below Water. I know a lot of people do not like A Song Below Water because they didn't really think that it was a fantasy. They didn't fuck with how Bethany C. Morrow dealt with the fantasy. I think that it is very clearly a fantasy world, but here I appreciated that Bethany C. Morrow doesn't exclude race from her fantasy. She understands that in a fantastical world, there would still be racism that was unrelated and different than just like, oh, you're a siren, or oh, you're, like there would still just be actual factual racism. And so here we get to see Naima battling with racism, because even as an Aloco, which are beloved in Portland, she is seeing that, it's not going to save her anywhere. Like, because she's black, she's gonna face racism. We still touch on the siren issues, and again, we are dealing with the fallout of A Song Below Water, so we go back to that, we circle back to there, we address the stuff that happened. Here we get to see a lot of Naima's family. That was lovely. I love me a good little family moment in a book. We got a cookout. You love to see it, a little reunion. It was just really great. 10 out of 10 recommend both this and A Song Below Water, and these covers are absolutely stunning. The next book is The Ivies by Alexa Dunn. The Ivies is set at an elite boarding school where we follow our main character. I forget her name, but she's unimportant to me, but she's a scholarship student at this school, and her friends are what they call the Ivies. Each one of them was given an Ivy League institution to apply to, try to get into. There's like a dead body that happens in their senior year at the beginning of the book, because it's a thriller YA, so someone has to be dead, and that's kind of where the story starts and kind of where the story ends for me, because the person that died I did not care about, and I don't think that Alexa Dunn cared about, and I don't think that anybody at the school would have cared about. Let me unplug this before Alexa starts talking to me. So I didn't care. It's supposed to be like a college admission scandal, like, oh, they'll do anything to get into college, even like murder each other. There's the big plot, like one of the plot points is that our main character got into Harvard, and that wasn't her. Like, she was supposed to, I think, go to like Penn or Brown. No, I don't remember which one. She was not supposed to go to Harvard. Like, that was not the school she applied to, but she applied anyway. And the girl that was murdered also got into Harvard, and the leader of their little group of the Ivies, that was her school. Like, she wanted Harvard, And so she didn't get in. And so like the idea was that like maybe the leader of the Ivies murdered her to like up her chances or whatever. And I didn't understand how this group came to be friends. It didn't make sense to me. I didn't understand how like the scholarship student, like when she was describing how she was trying to keep up with like her rich friends, a lot of the things that she was saying didn't make sense to me. I didn't think that like it felt like maybe if we had like pulled it back some, like maybe in 2008 2009 you could be doing these things to like keep up with the rich people, but in 2020 2021 2019 I didn't think that it made sense. I didn't think it was possible. I wasn't buying it. Not the way that our main character was describing it. I also thought that the end of the book was just, there was one too many plot twists and like red herring moments where it felt like, it very much felt like Alexa Dunn's first thriller. So overall I was not impressed and I didn't like it. I don't remember. I think I gave like 1 or 2 stars because again, I just wasn't a fan. I didn't think that it worked very well. But other people might enjoy it more than I did. I don't think it has the greatest rating on Goodreads at the moment, but I think I would much rather read another thriller from Alexa Dunn than go back and read her other sci-fi. So I'm happy that she's staying in this thriller place, but I don't think the first one was all that great. After the Ivies, when I got back to Kansas, I picked up The Bad Muslim Discount by Syed Masood. I talked about this, I think, in a reading vlog as well, but I really enjoyed it. It was a good time. There is some people on Goodreads, some Muslim readers on Goodreads have raised concerns about the representation in the book. I'm not going to touch on that because I myself am not Muslim, but we follow 2 timelines where each of them eventually converge in San Francisco, and there's a lot. This book is definitely messy. This book is definitely, a lot happens. There are definitely some morally gray decisions that are made, things that one of the protagonists decides to do. But overall, I had a good time. 5 out of 5 stars for me. Like I said, I talked about this before in a reading vlog, so I'll leave that linked somewhere so you can check out my thoughts there. Then I read A Queen of Gilded Horns by Amanda Joy. This is the sequel to A River of Royal Blood by Amanda Joy, which I read when that book came out, I think in 2019. The premise of the book is that in this fictional country, if there are sisters that are born to one another, like born into the royal family, they have to like kill the sister to achieve the throne. And so that's the setup here. But Eva does not want to kill her sister Isidore, even though Isidore in A River of Royal Blood was totally fine with that. But in A Queen of Gilded Horns, we get to see Isidore, I don't want to say like completely change and like shift, but much like A Chorus Rises and Bethany C. Morrow being able to take the antagonist of the first book and make us sympathize and understand their point of view, I think that Amanda Joy is able to do that with Isidore in A Queen of Gilded Horns. And the ultimate conclusion, while a little bit sloppy and a little bit, I don't know if I really vibed with it, and it was kind of a letdown overall because there were a lot of plot lines that were introduced in the second book that just didn't go anywhere. There wasn't enough material for the story, even though there could have been, but we just decided not to follow these new plot lines, and instead we just kind of had Eva, and it was a little weird. So it's not the best conclusion, it's not the best duology, but the world that Amanda Joy created is great. Everyone is blackety black, so if you want black fays and vampires and creatures of the night, they are in the book. It's a really solid fantasy, and one that I think tackles themes of like oppression and colonialism and imperialism when the colonizers are black. And overall, I do recommend the series, and I think that people should read it. I don't think it's as hyped on BookTube as it could be, even if the second book does kind of drop the ball a little. Then I read The Housewives, The Real Story Behind the Real Housewives by Brian Moylan, and this was okay. If I hadn't like messed up this like dust jacket and like left it all crinkled and I'd lost my receipt, I probably would have returned this to the store. I thought this was going to give me Ladies Who Punch vibes, and it wound up not giving that. If you're a fan of The Housewives, I don't think there's anything new in here. I don't think there's anything that like you couldn't have guessed or just kind of, gathered by watching the show. But as someone who doesn't watch it, like there were a couple moments that were interesting, but overall it's just not the greatest, particularly because Bravo has such a tight hold on the Real Housewives that there isn't a lot of interviews in here. There's not a lot of like new information. And so it is what it is, because all the people who are on the Housewives, not all of them, but the people, they didn't sit down for this. And at least Ramen Tutti got to sit down with all of the people of The View, and even the people he didn't really talk to, you know, like, it was fine. Although even in that one, I had some issues because it was very clear that Ramen Tutti and Meghan McCain were friends. And so there were definitely times where he could have gone a little harder on Meghan McCain, and he didn't because of the friendship. Here, this just didn't work. So I felt like I kind of just paid to read his Vulture recaps, and I didn't even get recaps. So overall, I don't recommend people purchase this, even if you're a fan of the Housewife franchise. But it wasn't the worst thing I've read all year. Then I picked up the Burn for Burn trilogy by Jenny Han and Siobhan Vivian. This was a lovely time. I know that I have a vlog for this, so that's Burn for Burn, Fire with Fire, and Ashes to Ashes. I thought this was going to be a contemporary story about these three girls getting revenge. And while that is what happens, we also have one of the best love triangles that I've ever read in fiction. I didn't think that it was possible for me to root for a triangle, because I always kind of like the idea of the love triangle. And even here, it's not like a true triangle, because, you know, the men in the story are not interested in one another. So, like, it's just like this little forked situation. We have like a vector point or whatever. But still, it is one of the best little situations that I've personally come across in fiction. I loved it. There are some paranormal, some speculative elements that come into play once you get into Fire with Fire. I mean, the hints are there in Burn for Burn. Like, I do think that Siobhan Vivian and Jenny Han did a really good job of, like, laying it out. But they really, in Fire with Fire, you're like, I think something spooky is going on. And then Ashes to Ashes is a perfect little conclusion. It's a great trilogy. I can't recommend them more highly. I know everyone is reading, or everyone read, you know, To All the Boys because of Netflix, and I'm pretty sure that the Summer I Turned Pretty books are up next. I personally do not think that the Summer I Turned Pretty books hold up that well, so I won't continue on with that trilogy. But these, I think, hold up really well, and especially with things like Nancy Drew that are currently airing on the CW that are contemporary with a little spooky wooky element. This fits in nicely with that, and I would honestly love to see this adapted. I don't know if I need a full 3 movies, because I don't even think To All the Boys needed 3 movies. I think To All the Boys could have been 2, just because of how they took like the first half of P.S. I Still Love You and gave it to All the Boys anyway. I think that they could have just smashed books 2 and 3 into one movie. And here, I think because the timeline is it's not an expansive timeline by any means. It's like a couple of months. This could just be a singular regular movie, and it would just be, I would love to read it. I would love to see it. If they did want to split it up, I would watch it. It could just be a good little mini series, whatever they want to do. This needs to be adapted. 10 out of 10. Can't recommend this more. If you want some backlist YA, this is it. Picked up The Maidens by Alex Michaelides, and that book was garbage. I hated it so much. It is supposed to be a psychological thriller wherein we follow our main character Mariana as she goes back to Cambridge because her niece, goddaughter situation, Zoe's friend, has been murdered. She's been found dead, and Mariana is going to console her, and along the way she involves herself in the investigation. She uncovers that, you know, there's like this weird classics professor who has like a cohort of girls that he is low-key sleeping with and like low-key gives preferential treatment to. And then, you know, there's a killer that's unmasked. Along the way, we have a surprise pedophile. We have weird grooming. We have just disgusting, like, there's a sequence where Mariana goes to dinner with the classics professor and is like eating raw lamb essentially. It's just, it tries so hard to do a lot of things, and I don't think it does any of those things particularly well, and I overall do not recommend this book to anybody at all for any reason. Then I read Falling by T.J. Newman. I got this from Libro through Libro FM's advanced listener copy program, and T.J. Newman's Falling is an excellent debut. It is an excellent audiobook. So if you have access to the audio, I do recommend the audio. This is a story of a pilot whose family has been, like, they're being held hostage essentially. and he is being told that he needs to crash the plane into an unknown destination that he'll find out along the way, or his family is going to die. And so this is the story of the pilot trying not to crash the plane and his family trying not to die. And the tension in this was excellent, but I do recommend it. The twists here were great. The solution, the outcomes, the climaxes were great. Everything just really came together. Then I embarked on my Leigh Bardugo journey. So that started off with the original trilogy, which I'm going to talk about first because I love these the most. So Shadow and Bone, I think in retrospect, is a really great start to a series. And then Siege and Storm and Ruin and Rising are just, they're also a good time. I enjoyed reading them. I want to say that Mal, I don't understand the slander. I love him. He's my son. When I get I'm going to get the I and Become a Blade tattoo. It's going to happen. Like, I already see it. It's going to go across from my little Sarah J. Maas Mountains. It'll be a moment. It's going to be the time. I'm going to love it. But slander. Y'all have been slandering this man. He has done nothing wrong his entire life. The only thing that he did wrong was not get a point of view. And I think that's what really holds this back as a trilogy, is that it is just Alina's perspective. And while I did not like what we're going to talk about next, I did appreciate how her later books in this world are all multiple perspective, because I think that really is what she does best. And when she does stick to a single narration is kind of where she's at her weakest. So I understand why this is, like, some people say this is the weakest, but overall I think this is an excellent trilogy. Then I read Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom, but to me, Crooked Kingdom doesn't really exist because I think that it was an overblown novella that did not need to exist, and I'm still bitter. And it's not because characters die in it or a character dies there, because I think he's still, like, if Leigh Bardugo wanted to kill that character, that could have happened in Six of Crows. There was a moment in Six of Crows for that to happen, and in that moment it would have made a lot more sense. When it happened in Crooked Kingdom, it was like, I'm at the end of the book, I need to kill one of these people, so I'm gonna kill him. And so for me, it was silly. But Six of Crows, I had a good time. I think I gave it like 3 out of 5 stars. Crooked Kingdom is a 1-star read because, again, most of that book is flashbacks and it's not enjoyable, and I don't know why y'all ride so hard for it. Also, Wylan is in, like, pretty much yellow face for, like, the entire book, and I don't understand, like, I still think that was weird. That was a weird, like, I understand, like, the narrative choice. Like, like, or what necessitated that, and, like, it wasn't him trying to, like, but it was also weird. It was also one of the few times in the series that we had to see racism, and so when it was a white character seeing that the world was racist, it was weird. Don't like it, didn't like it, don't recommend that one. Then we got to the Nikolai duology, so Rule of Wolves and King of Scars. This was another 4 out of 5 star read. I had a really great time. I thought this book did a lot of really interesting things. She put a lot of things into play, and then in Rule of Wolves, we didn't get to see any of them play out, really. Like, everything that she did with the Cult of the Starless Saint was kind of brushed under the rug, swept aside, and I really was annoyed with that, because I was okay with the Cult of the Starless Saint. I was okay with what the goal was. I was okay with that all happening. And then in this one, this was weird. And then the way that this ends clearly sets up another arching plot line, and I think it definitely sets up another, like, Six of Crows situation, wherein this and the original duology were just written to give us this I didn't like Rule of Wolves. Rule of Wolves, I think, is definitely the weaker of the two, and so I don't trust Leigh Bardugo to give me a duology, which is why I think I gave Ninth House 3 out of 5 stars, maybe 2 out of 5 stars. Like, this is solid, it's okay, but if this had just been a standalone, I probably would have enjoyed it more, because I don't trust her to give me a Ninth House sequel that isn't going to suck. Because so far, I've enjoyed the first book in the duology, and then by the time we get to the second book in a duology, it's over and it's done with, and I don't know if I'm going to care for, like, more than 2 books in the Ninth House world. Galaxy Stern here is fine. She's an average character. I still think it's a little, I don't know if I really love her backstory and, like, how she got into Gale. A lot of the things, Galaxy's supposed to be a Latinx character, but a lot of the times when she was discussing things or things were happening to her, it felt very, like, baby's first racist encounter, and it's like sis is in her 20s. I think someone would have been racist to her. Like a lot of the hardships in Galaxy's life seem to have been stemming from the fact that she sees ghosts and like ghosts have assaulted her. But there was like she was very naive when it came to like racist like attacks to her, and I didn't really believe that. So that also didn't love that for me. But I do like Darlington. I liked his like what his chapters, like the spring, because he was spring and like, I think after he was gone was winter. So like the spring moments of the book were the better books. I liked the lead up to like the ending of it. It was a decent read. But again, because I've had such bad situations with the duology from Lee Bardugo, I'm hesitant to continue in this. Then I read Wonder Woman Warbringer, which was I think it's like the first book in the DC Icons situationship thing. And I had a really good time. We get Diana, we get to see her leave the mascara with, what was her name? This little black girl. It was a fun time, little black girl. Because the black girl is like destined to start like World War III. And if they go to this specific location and do the specific thing, they can end this curse from continuing on in this little girl's family. And she's not a little girl. Like Diana and the girl are both like 17 in this. And it was like excellent time. The side characters here were really interesting. There were a couple of plot twists that I didn't see coming. There was actual high stakes. It was a great time. I don't think I've ever seen people talk about Wonder Woman Warbringer. When I was adding my review to the Goodreads thing, people had given it some mixed reviews when it came out at the time, but I had a good time. 5 out of 5 stars. Would recommend. Think everyone should read it. How could I forget? In between Siege and Storm and Ruin and Rising, I read Monogamy by Sue Miller. This book is horrible. Don't read Monogamy. I'm not even going to waste my breath talking about it because I did in the vlog. Just don't read it. Didn't like it. 1 out of 5 stars. Once my Lee Bardugo project came to an end, we were pretty much at the beginning of August. So now we're moving into my August reads I'm going to talk about anyway, just because August might have a lot of books in it. So they're included now. I started with The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides, and this was just as bad, if not worse. Well, I think in that video review I said it was a little bit better. But The Silent Patient and The Maidens are definitely on the same level of bad. You can definitely tell that the same author wrote both books, both in terms of how the therapists are written and how everything plays out. Like, you can tell that the same man wrote both books. They have his signature. I think that you could honestly swap Mariana and Theo out and get the same book. I did a standalone video review of this, so I'll leave that linked. But that book was horrendous. It was horrible, and I cannot believe that people enjoyed it. I read TheQuarterback by Tal Bauer. This is what is the word I'm looking for? It's a companion to The Jock by Tal Bauer that I read for my Kindle Unlimited romance video that I did a couple months ago. This was cute. We follow the best friends, Justin's dad, and then Wes's best friend. It's their romance, and it's them coming to terms with their sexuality and like falling for one another. And it was cute. It definitely was off to a bumpy start at the beginning of the book. I wasn't as invested, and because it's them coming to terms with themselves, it takes a lot longer to get to like the sexy smutty times, because the Jock, like, I don't want to say immediate, but they definitely are hot and heavy pretty early on in the book. This one doesn't include a hate crime, so that's nice. It does feature a third act. I guess it's technically a breakup. They don't really communicate in this situation, but that was a thing. And what facilitates the breakup, I thought was a little bit unreasonable. There was definitely some unrealistic. I don't want to spoil anything, but what happened for them to get to the point where they took a break, they broke up, there was like the dramatic moment, I thought was a little silly. I thought it was unreasonable given the age of the characters. I was like, this is foolish. But I will say that the characters that were being unreasonable did have a conversation, and they did recognize that they were being unreasonable. And so it was a little bit easier for me to forgive them, because it was like, okay, if you know that you were just deep in your feelings and what you did was unreasonable, then I can forgive it. And it is a romance, and so the characters, you know, they work through, they get their happy ever after. And I don't know if I needed the epilogue. I think you can, I don't want to say you can skip the epilogue because it was cute, but I personally just didn't need, I liked where the book ended. And then the epilogue was just kind of like, okay, this is a little bit too much sugary sweetness for me, but I'm happy for them. I would continue to read books in this situation. I don't know what those books would be because this book definitely was not as expansive as the Jock. I feel like the Jock had some more side characters like Wes, like not Wes, like Colton and like Justin. Not Nick. Y'all, this is going bad. The Jock had side characters like Colton and Nick, and this one they're pretty isolated for the whole time because the book starts off with Colton getting injured, and so it's kind of like a hurt comfort situation, and along with that age gap. So I don't think there's going to be like a third companion here, but I definitely am still following Talbauer on Amazon, so I see when he releases new things, and I will be reading from him again in the future, I'm sure. After the Jock, I swapped over and I went for some traditionally published romance, and I picked up If the Shoe Fits by Julie Murphy. This is from Hyperion, and I think Disney is doing a situation where they do like retellings of the Disney stories, and because it's being published by Hyperion, they can use the Disney animated names. So we get not only Cinderella or Cindy in this book, but we get Drew and Anna for Drew. I think it's like Drusilla and Anastasia in the animated movie, and then Lady Tremaine. So we get to have all those familiar names that you don't get to use in like your regular retelling. I mean, you could use Cinderella, but the stepsisters usually have different names, and it's usually not Lady Tremaine. I will say that I liked what Julie Murphy did with the stepsisters and the stepmother. I think that what she did, she could have easily gone like campy and over the top and just completely unhinged, and she didn't do that. So I did like what she did with the stepsisters and the family overall, and how she incorporated the mice into the story because they become Cinderella's like actual siblings and not just like pets or something. So that was all nice. Like the family stuff was great. Overall, the romance I didn't believe. So the setup is, in this book, Lady Tremaine's her name is Erica, and she's been the successful executive producer on Before Midnight, which is like a bachelor style show. So 20 some odd people vying for the attention of this one person. And Cindy works her way onto the show. She's just out of fashion school. She just graduated from Parsons. She doesn't quite know what she's going to do. And she decides that originally it was just going to be her sisters Anna and Drew on the show, and Erica was like, oh, you know, you wouldn't really want to go, but Cindy talks her way on and she decides, no, I actually do want to do it. And so she gets on the show, she's going to do it, and she knows the suitor because on her flight home from New York, she sat next to the suitor. His name is Henry. And so when he shows up as the suitor on Before Midnight, it's like, okay, they have this pre-established connection, it's going to be cute. And I think that the book suffered because we never got Henry's perspective. We only were with Cindy. And because it was on this reality type show where they're trying to find love, and she wasn't the person, like she was like one of 20 girls, a lot of what we got was like him going on dates with other people and her not being with him. And so we got like her connection to her roommates in the little chateau where they were staying. And so to me, at a certain point, it started to read a little bit more just like general fiction than romance. And because we could see Cindy having feelings for Henry, but Henry, because he was the suitor, it felt more like he just had feelings for everybody. Even in moments in the narrative when it was just them one-on-one, it was hard for me to be like, yeah, he's in love with her in the same way, because we were never in his head and the scenes were never written in a way for me to be like, oh, he's actually in love with her or whatever. The third act situation, I was happy for Cindy because it wasn't so much a breakup as it was like Cindy choosing herself and doing things for her. And so she went to this job interview. But I also think that sort of played into it reading a little bit more just like general fiction than a romance. It does have a happily ever after, and they do come together. You do get a happy for now, at least. Like, it was cute, but I do think that ultimately, I don't know. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars because it's published by Disney. Clear, like, there wasn't any smut. There was a little bit more like suggestivity than I assumed when I opened the book. So if you're someone who doesn't like reading about smut, or it's like baby's first romance, I think that If the Shoe Fits could be fine for you, because like there's no explicit content. It's all just very suggested. But overall, I think that there are probably better romances to read, and this is more along the lines of something you can get from the library. I read The Final Girl Support Group, but this book was absolutely horrible. Like, absolutely 12 out of 10 was not a good time. I don't understand who the book was written for or how this book got published. You would think that a book about, like, final girls would actually be interesting, but I think that Grady Hendrix just wanted to type the word final girl 12 million times. Like, I'm almost convinced that he had the word like just sitting on the clipboard so he could get Control V, because it pops up on like every other sentence and in some of the dialogue. And I do think that the book is very bland because there's absolutely no seasoning in terms of the writing style. Like, there's absolutely no, it reads like a technical manual for something that's supposed to be, again, like a slashery horror thriller situation where this group of people is being hunted. But also, I think for a book called The Final Girl Support Group, the support group is very much an afterthought in the narrative, and Lynette is not at all invested in being with the group. I also am never going to forgive Grady Hendrix for giving us Adrienne as like the OG final girl in his universe, who was a black woman who was okay with a white girl playing her in the movie version of her life, depicting her trauma, because she was aware that middle America would go see it if it was a white girl getting murdered. And so she just wanted the check to clear because she was going to own the franchise rights anyway. That was weird to me. And then, spoiler alert, but Adrienne is the only final girl that is murdered in the events of the book. She's the only one that dies. And there's a point in the book where her ghost, Lynette hallucinates Adrienne and like makes her the magical emotional support Negro. The book is just ass. I actually am probably not going to film that standalone review. The book is just ass. From beginning to end, start to finish, absolutely unremarkable. So those are all of the things that I have read recently, just in case you did not want to watch all those reading vlogs and like slog through hours of content. Let me know what you've been reading recently. If you made it to the end of the video, drop this emoji down there in the comment section. But I'm gonna go. I'll see you guys again soon with another video. But until then, and until next time, bye.